Who affected that morning? Fasted cardio. Appreciate y'all, and seriously, I know that was a last minute thing, us moving that, so appreciate y'all being flexible with us. Ready? They ready? So I'll start out just by thanking everybody. This is a really thorough, detailed process that we go through getting prepared for the draft. A lot of people involved. The college scouts and the college staff, they're at the heart of this process. They work on it for a whole calendar year. A lot of late nights at hotels, and families make a lot of sacrifices. And then the very inclusive process, the entire staff, the coaches, the analytics, there's a lot of people involved, and a lot of hard work has gone into this. So very appreciative, and we feel very confident and excited as we get into these next few days, and we know we're going to make this team better. Put that down.
Yeah, as you all are winding down this process, how do you all feel going in based on, needs versus, what might be there for you at 15 and what might be there for you to, the flexibility to maybe move if you have to?
Yeah, you look at all that, and look, we know there are specific needs as you go into the draft, but you still have to go in there with a mindset to make the football team better. And we want to take impact players off the board, but yet you do have to, like you're saying, Led, look at the entire draft, the total picture, and assess players that you feel like you can get at different parts of the draft, and looking at kind of the strengths of the draft and determining other teams and where runs are going to happen in the draft. So it's all a part of it. We just have to take impact players off the board at the end of the day and make sure we're effective.
You mentioned your staff has been at this for a little over a year. Can you give us an idea about how many players you guys have looked at from big view and then narrow down to maybe some numbers?
It starts, you start the first, it may be 800 names that you start with, and you continue to narrow it down. And Zach, really this year it's interesting because there's more players on the board, draftable players on the board this year than in previous years. With the COVID and with there's a lot of prospects. And the cool thing about that is now as you get into undrafted free agency, or the 8th round, you can call it this year, because there are going to be a lot of good players left over. So we really have to attack undrafted free agency in the right way. So it starts off, it's really like a process of elimination. It starts off with a big number, and you keep going through and keep narrowing it down. But I would say this year there's there's more draftable players than there usually are.
When did you feel comfortable? You guys, we're locked in, we're ready for this draft?
Yeah, I would say we wrapped up with the coaches and kind of middle of last week, and you have the board set, but the hay's never in the barn. The board is set right now, but you're continuing to gather as much information as you can. We've got more phone calls and more. You do everything you can all the way down to the wire until you're making that pick. So the board was set last week, and yet we're continuing to work through it.
How would you characterize the amount of phone calls you've been taking and making, not only in reference to teams looking to trade with you, or you possibly trading up, or continuing phone calls about possibly trading Kirk?
Yeah, Mark, that's important, particularly with now in reference to Kirk. With any player, like we've always said, hey, look, we're going to do what's best for this football team, whether that's a trade or whatever it is, and so we're open to whatever it is if it's going to help the team. Those calls are really important too in terms of the trades, and what you want to really get a feel for going into the draft, knowing who's aggressive and who actually wants to come up, who's looking to move down. You want to get a feel for those. Now, they don't really materialize until the actual draft because it depends on what's there, but that's how those calls go. A GM would say that, hey, look, if a certain player is there, we could be willing to come up. This is what we would give up. So you can go ahead and be prepared for who you expect to come up. Another thing we do is we have a chart basically on the tendencies of every general manager based off their drafts, so you can know who's more aggressive. Like, what's the rate of this GM? 70% of the time they move up, this percentage they move down. So you want to know who's actually willing to make a trade, and so it can kind of narrow your process as you're going through that. But those calls are really important.
What do you think other GMs categorize you as then? If you're analyzing other GMs, what do you
I'm 75% trade up.
75% trade
So I'm more aggressive.
There are players in this class, and really in every class, there's, certain players who are tagged with like the character issue, kind of
Yeah.
label, which can entail so many different things. And I'm just curious, like what aspects of that, for the Falcons, are you comfortable with, and what are you not comfortable with?
Yeah, very, very detailed process. It starts with the college scouts, and they're the first boots on the ground. They gather a lot of intel and a lot of information from a lot of sources, and they go through that. And then, again, I'm not going to get into all the specifics of how we go about gathering information, but then you have background checks. There's a lot of layers to that as we determine it, and there are going to be some players, it's much like the medical, right? When you go through the medical process, you get all the information, you get the doctors involved, and there's going to be some players that have a medical alert that, hey, this is something we have to talk about, and some players that fail physicals, and you hate that. You never want that to happen. It's sad when you go through it that, hey, this player is it's when you get that list sometime after the combine, you have that medical meeting, and you see some players that you actually can't draft because of the medical. It's the same process with the character. You go through it. There's character flags that we discuss, and there's players that we wouldn't bring in the building because of those things. But it's a very detailed, thorough process. We take it serious.
Are there any players that you crossed off your board this year due to character?
There's going to always be a number. Again, character, medical, every year. That's just the norm, Josh. There's always going to be players at different levels that, for whatever reason, there's the players that have flags, and there's players that you wouldn't bring in. That's a norm. That's every year for every team.
You said they're more draftable players, and you got to look at the UGFs. Was that the reason why the Locals Day was so hefty? I've never seen a near 90-member Locals Day.
It's cool. That's such a great day, and there's so many good players, and I always say this, but it's just the truth. There's so many good players in this area, so when we get the Locals Day, we get to bring all those guys in. It's cool too because guys that don't have to come, like a bunch of the Georgia players, I feel like we have their whole team here, and those guys come and spend time here. So, but look, that's a really, really important day, and I think it's unique being in Georgia because we get to see so many really good athletes.
It feels like a buyer's market for teams that want to trade up this year. That's the conventional wisdom. Is your experience been that it's, based on what you're hearing, that's the case?
Meaning teams?
Meaning it's going to be cheaper to trade up than it might be in the past because of the layout of this draft.
We'll see. I think every draft's so different. You look at last year, you had 6 quarterbacks going the top, 14 offensive players went, right? The first defensive player came off at 15. That'd be great if that happens this year. It's not going to happen this year. But because of that, because of people with the quarterback position, that's why last year, and I know what you're saying, that's not going to be the case. That's an interesting ring, man. That thing is rolling. So, but this is a different draft in that case. There's not going to be as many quarterbacks, not going to be as many offensive players, and it's a very strong draft throughout, particularly in the middle, where I would think Josh teams probably feel like the players that they get at certain points, okay, hey, there's going to be some guys we're going to be really excited about in the second round. There's going to be guys we're excited about in the fourth round. So that all makes a difference.
Terry, every draft is filled with pressure just to get picks right. Do you feel an extra sense of pressure this year given the team's long playoff drop?
Yeah, the pressure's always there, absolutely, and that's a part of it. You know, if you're not comfortable with the pressure, then you shouldn't be working in the NFL. Definitely shouldn't be in a leadership position. But you got to get the picks right. And at the end of the day, right now we got 5 draft picks, and you can look at historical numbers, and every year there's going to be first-round picks that don't play well, and there's going to be undrafted free agents that end up being really good players. You know, so you have to get the picks right, regardless of if we make 5 picks and get 10 players in undrafted free agency, whatever it is. It's about getting the picks right.
How aggressive will you look at possibly, trading down, getting more draft capital?
Yeah, Mark. The thing about that is it always sounds good, and we're obviously going to look at it. We're going to make the right decision for the team, but you have to have a willing partner. You see sometimes someone will say, well, just trade down here and do this. Well, is somebody going to trade? And that's going to depend on what's still on the board at that time. So what we have to do is when we're on the clock, We have to look at the players that are there and weigh out what we can get in the trade back, if there's an option as a trade back, and just compare that and weigh those things out. So we'll have all those conversations prior to the draft, leading up to it, and make the right decision for the team on the clock. But I always feel like I need to say that you sometimes you want to do it and it makes sense, but it's not like on the draft simulator when you can just force the trades and do what you want. This is real life where you have to, but that is something that obviously we'll consider.
It feels like this draft is, and you were kind of saying it, there's a depth of talent, right, that maybe you can get a similar type of player late in the first round as you can maybe in the middle of the second round. Does that make it harder to trade back because there is that kind of like depth and similar talent across the board?
Yeah, it's just it just really depends, because you still don't know how they're going to come off the board. So we can look at it right now and assess this draft how we see it. But as you know, there's always curveballs in this thing, and we don't really know what's going to happen. We can, so it's one of those situations where, yes, you do feel like there could be some good options, but you don't know until it really starts.
You guys were the curveball last year.
We were the curveball.
Yeah, you were the curveball.
Because he's a local kid, I'm wondering where you see Travis Hunter as more of an offensive player or a defensive player in terms of success in this league.
Yeah, special dude. Obviously, he's not going to be there when we're on the clock, but it's probably one of those situations, Zach, where I would assume a team would look at it like he can do a lot of different things, but we got to put him in one room to just be able to focus and learn. It's hard to just get sprinkled in on offense. You need to really learn it, and then so whatever side of the ball they focus on, he's meeting that, and then he has packages on the other side. But whatever team that is, they're going to be excited to have that guy, dynamic playmaker.
Terry, I'm curious, your first 4 drafts, personally, I think you've done better, but how do you assess how you've done with those selections?
Yeah, Ken, just kind of overall the drafts. Yeah, there's obviously some things that we look at. Like I was taking a run yesterday, and Tyler Algier was just pulling up, and he's all yoked up. He looks good right now, and Tyler is obviously a 5th-round pick, and we have a 4th-round pick that's now the 2nd highest paid center in the league right now. So you can go through it, and the player that's replacing him was an undrafted free agent, and he's a really good player. Talking about Ryan Newsel, so we can go through the things that we've done well. And I feel like one thing we've done a really good job of is we really the profile of the player, what's the vision, and how they're going to fit for us. That's an important aspect of it. That's why we have such an inclusive process. But there's always things that we're going to look at. We don't focus on the things that have went well. We focus on the things that didn't go well and the areas that we do have to improve on. And there are those areas that we have to do that. And it's always, we're process-oriented, we're process-driven. It's always about how are we going to change this process to make us more effective and increase our hit rate. That's what we're always looking at.
I guess to that end, if you go to specifics of the grape, like what are some things that maybe you've realized we have to do this better, or
yeah,
an improved process that's going to help you guys have a better draft this year?
Yeah, I think it always comes down to that number one part, the vision, and working along with the coaches and working along with the staff and making sure we have a clear vision for what those players are and how they're going to fit with our team. You never want to, I feel like anytime with anything you get in trouble if you're desperate and you reach. And that's when I talk about taking the best player available for us, it's about taking impact players and making your team better. And when you get more hyper-focused on a specific need and a specific position, that's when you get yourself in trouble, Ken. I truly, and that's not just these last 4 drafts, that's over 23 years, 24 years I've been in the league or whatever that is. That's when you can get yourself in trouble. If you just focus on having a clear vision for what they're going to be for you and taking good players, impact players at whatever spot that is, that's when you can be more effective.
Last thing, would it be fair then to say that there have been instances in the last 4 years where you've probably done that?
It's hard to look at a specific one and say this is what we did there, but ultimately it's about having that discipline, because we say that, Ken, and we say this is how we're going to do it, but we just got to have that discipline and always follow through.
Terry, you mentioned deadline spur action. Do you feel like you may end up fielding more calls, possibility to trade for Kirk during the draft?
We'll see. You never know. A big part of this is going into these weeks. There are a lot of phone calls with me and other GMs, and also with our entire staff, the pro staff, of looking at surplus and looking at where there's needs in other areas. And then so there's always in-draft trades. There's also after the draft, depending on what happens, things really shift. So with Kirk or anybody else, I couldn't really anticipate that right now. It just depends. But that's a big part of it, communicating with teams and looking at where they are and how this draft is going to affect their needs.
Kirk is here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Was that a surprise? Because Raheem had said, in league meetings that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say a surprise. It's this is a voluntary thing, and so whether a player comes or doesn't come, we have a lot of really good professionals that we know whether they're here or somewhere else, they're going to really take care of their body, and obviously Kirk is one of those guys. So I wouldn't say a surprise because it is voluntary. These guys, they put in a lot with what they do, and so they deserve times with their families if they decide not to come or to come. So I wouldn't say it was a surprise.
He's going to be a regular attendee, or was he just checking in the first day? And
yeah, wouldn't get into all that. But like I said, this is a voluntary thing, so it's up to him whether he wants to be here or not.
Do you talk to him, or do you just kind of let him do his workouts, do his thing?
Have I talked to him?
Have you had
Yeah. Yeah.
Any truth to the can you confirm the Schefter report on the trades that you've been fielding calls and the $20 million number?
That we haven't put a number on it. We wouldn't share specific conversations with what we're doing, but no, we haven't. To answer your question, we haven't put a specific number on it.
You guys have taken the position, your owner's taken the position when it comes to Kirk, but the money's already been spent. Is it fair to say that the money is not a holdup in trading him?
Yeah, if we just have to look at whatever, say if we get an offer on any player, we get an offer, we have to look at it and say, is this going to help our team? Is this the betterment of our team? And then we'll do it. With Kirk or anyone else, it comes down to that. But the report that says there's a specific number, that's not accurate. We haven't said that.
Has your overall view of this draft class changed at all since the combine, now that you've gotten more into it?
Yeah, it always shifts. Like I said, we set our initial board in the February meetings, and then we get into the combine. We get to meet the players more. We get more medical information. Like I said, Taryn, that's one of the toughest ones when you get medical, and some players are eliminated because of medical. That's the hardest thing because that affects it, and we're not experts on that. We just have to listen to what the doctors say and things like that, But you get the medical information. You continue to every touch point's important to us. Every time we meet players, all the time we spend with them, all the phone calls, and so it does change after that point. It still goes back to the football, but every layer of information we get is important.
Can you decide on a theme of a draft before it even happens?
Like what? Give me an example.
Because I remember at the combine, it was like very defensive heavy, and then we're saying like the later rounds now or the later in the first round, early in the second round, it's all like similar talent. Is that something that you still see now, or do you think that's something we need to see play out?
There's things you need to see play out, but at the end of the day, I would say the theme of the draft, it's a good draft that you can at every level. And you're going to find players that you're really excited about in the 7th round. And again, in undrafted free agency, we've got to be aggressive in the right way and make sure we affect this team because there are going to be good players there after the draft. So it's a deep draft.
You mentioned being mindful of the runs that can take place in a draft. Given kind of the depth of this class, how specifically are you looking at the potential variety of runs that could happen from 15 to 46?
Yeah, we've seen it. That's how it usually happens, right? There's one position goes off, and then it can just start spinning out, and teams start trading up for that, and you just never know. You try your best to anticipate it, and we got to think about those things. Like I said, the pro staff does a really good job assessing needs, and we also make a lot of phone calls and try to gather as much intel as we can to see what we expect to happen. It's different when you're picking 4. Right, you kind of know that you have to have 4-player stack. It's different when you're picking 8. Now we got to have 15 players stacked, and we have to be ready to take one of those players based off your 15 stack. But we try our best to anticipate those things.
What could change between now and tomorrow based on your board being set a week ago, and also how much discussion among you and your staff about maybe the top 2 or 3 guys that are filling that top spot? Was it a clear consensus, good back and forth? Can you educate me on that process?
You're talking about when you say the top.
On your board, that he's there, you're in a draft.
Well, what you got to do is that we got to stack it 15. You know what I mean? More so because it's a and look, my kids have asked me that question because their teachers at school are asking them who we're drafting, and I'm like, guys, we don't know. You know, but we stack it in that way, and you have to feel good about those 15. There's not like when I say all the hay's never in the barn, because you want to continue, just make another call. There's never you want to gather as much information as you can. You want to continue to dig and dig and dig, but you feel good about those 15 names. You know, but we're still going to be watching tape tonight. That's just all a part of it.
That's great. After a year, like you're still, I mean, it doesn't become like too much information. You're like, listen, my gut telling me we're all in this consensus. Like, all right, this is our guy. Like, can you, by adding more and more layers to the cake, can you?
Yeah.
Can it be?
I think I think it's a mindset. I think, and y'all probably know if it's one of those things where you always want to do more. And I know what you mean. You don't want to go in circles. You have to have, and we feel good about the process, and we feel good about all the work that's gone into it. But you always want to watch another game. You know, you always want to make one more phone call. You always want to dig a little bit deeper into things. That's just, I think, when you have that kind of mindset, and you just want to keep doing more and more and more.
Is it conventional logic to say that less picks means less flexibility in the draft?
Not really, because it's kind of where your mindset with it. You know, because I would say, Mark, there's some people that it's quality over quantity. You know, they'd rather be really aggressive and get the guys, come out of the draft with certain guys and use those. And there's some people that want to get more picks and have more hits and those types of things. So if you're saying in terms of giving us the ability to move up with having more draft capital, I understand that. You can say that. But I still think it comes down to making sure we feel convicted on those particular players.
The chart and trading actual picks.
Yeah.
In your experience and maybe your own opinion, how do you feel about draft picks being traded this draft for next year? Like, does that hold less value or more value, or teams more apt, you know, to be, I don't need it, I'm not worried about an next year's draft pick now, I want somebody this year for this reason?
Yeah.
I mean, how does that?
So it's a good question, because there are actually some teams this year that have double-digit picks, and they know that these guys can't all make our football team. So they actually want to move some of that capital and get more so let's move up and let's get some capital for next year and let's shift some of this capital. So it just kind of depends on where you are as a team, because what you want to do is you want to make sure those guys can make your team, and you want to make sure some people can't handle that many picks. So it just depends. But our mindset, our philosophy with having this many picks right now is, okay, we have to make sure we hit on those picks. And so if there's trades available, if you can move down in the first or second round and it makes sense to us, we'll do it. But we'll also have the confidence and conviction to take that player off the board if it makes sense to us.
When you're looking at some of those options that are maybe on the table involving a trade, is it more important to you the landing spot and where you would ultimately move back to say we want a player in this range and we're comfortable there, or is it about the overall kind of value of the package that you're getting in return?
Yeah, it's all of it. You know, if you're going to move this far back, you better make sure you have enough players in your stack and you're going to feel good about what you get, and you're weighing, okay, if we can get this player and this pick compared to this player. And so it kind of depends on where you are. If you only have a couple players left in your stack and you want to move down 5 picks, and because like we said, those runs can happen at any point. A particular position goes, and then you got 3 in a row. That's kind of how that happens. So it's just it's all a weighing process.
Being that you've changed defensive coordinators and what would be the apparent need for more players on defense, how much did Jeff, during this draft process, his input and everything else, how much did it change what you guys would have done, or how much you evaluate kind of that nature?
Man, it's been fun going through the process with Jeff. And so really the new defensive coaches, Jeff Olbrick, Nate Ollie, and Rudy. So they've all jumped right into the process. And obviously we have defensive coaches that are still here. And it's a passionate group, man. We were in, before we brought them in the room, we were in like draft meetings with just the scouts. And it's just like ruckus going on down the hall. It sounds like people are fighting in the room, and I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, what's going on? It's like bricks just watching film with the guys. It's just a different deal, man. Like, they're really intense and really but it's been cool going through that process and watching film with them and getting into it, specifically with, like, with Brick, watching tape with him and the way he watches tape and talking about the skill set of a player and because we're projecting, right? We're projecting players into the NFL. So this is what you would change with him, and this is how I could coach him, and this is how he would affect our team. It's been cool going through that process with the defensive guys. It's obviously a big influence because we do things together. Now, if we have a guy that's been really low on the board throughout the whole process and then the coaches are really high on him, we're not just going to move him up there. We're going to go through it. We're going to watch the tape. We're going to have those discussions and come to a consensus in the right way. But that's a big part of it, and not just with Brick. It's the same with Zach and Marquis. So we have a very inclusive process. But it's he's a different dude now. He's passionate.
You guys have taken offensive skill players the last 4 years. The consensus is that it has to be defense this year. Does it have to be defense this year in the first round?
Well, look, we got to take an impact player, and what usually happens, Mark, just the truth. What usually happens with that is you're going to have players in that category, and when it works out perfect, you have players that are in a high category that fits one of your needs, and so you'd expect with the depth of the draft, and okay, there's going to be defensive players, but what you can't do at any pick, if this is the category and you're reaching down here for a need and just taking if you say, Terry, you got to take this particular player right here. Okay, you can take that player, but if you're dipping down here to take him and reaching like we were talking about earlier, that's when you make mistakes. And if there's impact players at other positions, we got to make this team better. So we're not going to be afraid to take an impact player off the board and make the team better regardless of what that pick is.
Are you
So
confident
how do you
that,
weigh that? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are you confident that a really good defensive player that you guys like will be there at number 15 for you?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I promise I would be looking in it, and I'd probably we've probably been in 4 straight Super Bowls at this point, but I don't have that crystal ball. So we'll see.
So quarterback again?
So what'd you say? Come on, man.
You know that's not it.
But so how do you weigh the impact player that's there, that's got a flag, that's got a medical?
Yeah.
You possibly looking at 2 guys that could probably help your pass rush, but they, got issues there.
Yeah, that's a part of it. That's a part of the process, and so that's where it's it's medical, it's character. We always talk about intangibles and how critical they are to us and how important those things are, but that's where you do weigh those things. When you're looking at the board, you have the players where they are, but you're weighing all those factors, and it's a thorough, detailed process for us, and the way we do it, we take it very serious.
This draft here, we've got like 22 pass rushers at various points in the draft. Do y'all see that as, these outside pass rushers?
So on defensive ends, edge guys?
Defensive ends, OLBs. Is this draft really that deep? I mean, you got older guys that, might have been at 3 different schools. You got younger guys that play in 3 years. But
don't know a particular number of how many pressure players that, and it's, like we said, D-Led, it's all relative, man. Like, you got 22, but how many do you have on day 1? How many do you have on day 2? You know what I mean? You're talking about a lot of 7th-round picks that are going to be fighting to make your team. You know what I mean? So it just depends on where those guys are. But overall, like I said, it's a very deep draft, very strong draft.
This week you signed Easton Stick.
Yeah.
What do you like about him? What do you see? What's the plan for him?
Yeah, he's got traits, really good makeup, and we're at 90 right now. So it's 4 quarterbacks right now. That's kind of the norm for the offseason. So just excited for him to come here and compete.
Thanks, guys.
Good.
Can I ask you a Twitter question real quick, Terry?
Oh, goodness.
Are y'all getting the uniform?